Hello, this is the Harvard Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. And so I'm going to just jump right in. So this episode is focusing in on, again, the musical aspects, particularly with horror films. And so I'm doing a different spin. Instead of talking about a musical score as I addressed on Monday's episode with Halloween, I'm focusing in on the soundtrack of when Jason Takes Manhattan, even though the title doesn't allude that it's Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees. But anyway, that's not the point. But that, I'm going to also add that the little extra, interesting facts too, along the lines of my main point here is focusing in on the sound of and how the music aesthetic of the 80s, of how that was influenced too. Okay, so I'm focusing in on these musical 80s sounds that's influenced in the soundtrack of Jason Takes Manhattan. All right, along the lines of, as I mentioned, about interesting facts too. Okay, so let's get right into the heart of the matter about this. Okay, so I'm focusing in on the song "The Darkest Side of the Night." So when I first heard this, when I saw the movie, first hearing the song and then seeing the movie is, let me say that's what I'm addressing. So hearing the song, it caught my attention because of the subtle tone. It reminded me of a song that would be, okay, hold on, sweetie. Okay, because you ate some. You want some more food? You want more breakfast? Baby, let me finish what I'm doing first, okay? And it reminded me of a Journey song or the beat you would hear from a Journey song, and that soft rock subtlety to it. And so that goes into the juxtaposition of the movie. So the movie is focusing in on Jason Voorhees and the bringing in the horror and the terror to these young people and traveling to New York to do all of this. It's a weird concept, and it's strange and crazy, and it goes with that whole feel and the amp of going with the 80s idea of, this is just from my point of view, about, the access and contemporary comments on how fast life was going at that time, and all of this. It kind of seems like that was interlaced in this particular film. And it also seems as if they were taking a new direction as far as keeping up with the aspect of of the franchise of Nightmare on Elm Street, because it's in 89 or so. So, this was around the same time when Nightmare on Elm Street was, for what it was, they were focusing in on the aspects of youth culture, particularly with the MTV generation of Flash and what's popular and here and now, and keeping up with current events. And so I think that's probably the realm of what was going on with the idea and the concept of Jason, takes Manhattan. Jason goes to Manhattan. And so also what caught my attention too, don't do that, Piper. Sorry about that, my baby girl. She's 2 years old and she likes to be interactive and keep her hands in things, but she's so sweet. So also what caught my attention is the actor that was one of the main actors, the male lead. And because I remember recalling him, seeing him, in my daytime drama growing up as a kid in the 90s. And, stuff like The Guiding Light and As the World Turns. But I think he was from Young and the Restless. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting, seeing, him in a movie like that. And so it goes to all along the lines to say that, actors aren't the sum of their parts. So which I mean by that is that it's their job to take on different elements outside what they might be well known for or so. All right, so with this being said, let's get into the aspects and facts of first about the song The Darkest Night, and then going into facts you might not know or you might know about this movie. And of course, these sources will be provided in this episode. So I am reading to you about the facts of this from Sonic Hits, and it's The Darkest Side of the Night by Metropolis. So, overall meaning. Says, in the Metropolis song, The Dark Side of the Night, the lyrics describe a sense of hopelessness and despair in a city that is struggling. The opening lines, falling angels into the street, it's an empty dance and so incomplete. This signifies that people are giving up and losing faith in the city. The hollow voices which spreads a cry for the devil's night. Now, this is very prevalent, too, because at the time in the 80s, me enjoying history. So, Mayor Koch, and everything about cleaning up the city, making it better, and the harsh reality of all the attempts in that and how it was failing, and all the crime and drug and everything that was the drug problem, everything that was going on at that time. And then what people want to say about Mayor Giuliani, he really did his due diligence and his best to clean up the city of New York. And so I think they were making commentary about that too, about the harsh reality of the way the society was going at the time in the 80s, particularly with the issues with what was going on in New York as far as the failing political agendas and how, schools were failing, all kinds of stuff, which is prevalent. It prevails to what is the current event of New York at the state that it is today, with it being seen as a state of for all of this destruction that's going on in our society now, and deemed as a sanctuary state for the influx of different. It's one thing, and it's prideful to come into the country doing it the legal way, and it's another way to deem yourself as a sanctuary state for people who just want to come because they can, without having any respect or to the procedure of becoming a legal citizen. And so, I think all of these is really interesting too, on the element that they chose to set a horror film in Manhattan. And from my point of view, and a theory going on the line of a theory, I think that was intentional to go on the impact of how the state of being that New York is a frightful state, and it's something that needs to be reconstructed. All right, so says the hollow voices which spread a cry for the devil's night captured the collective agony and anguish of the inhabitants. The following lines: you tried before, but you can't buy a clue, no matter what you do, suggest that there seems to be no solution or escape from the plight. Says, the chorus features the repetition of the phrase, the darkest side of the night burns like a fire of the wasted lives. Here the dark side of the night represents the suffocating, emptiness, the wasted lives, and the sense of hopelessness that engulfs the city. The mention of the neon shadows that points the way describes the false hope of illusion of a solution that is spread to the city's leaders. Again, going on to what I was saying about how the government is failing, particularly failing the citizens of New York. So, and you see that neon light in the sky as far as a beacon of hope, of prosperity, of all of that, but it's actually a false. That's quite elegant to say that it's a false illusion, which is a disillusion and disappointment of what is not to come. So, of a solution that is spread by the city's leaders, there's despair and desperation, and is probable in the lines such as, you try to fix it, but there's nothing you can do. You just got to see it through. And in the city, you give and they take. You reach the limit, you bend, and then you break. And there's no escape. So this is also leads to the point. And I would like, please, so I'm working on this. As I mentioned, I haven't mentioned this early on in my intro in this episode, but Spreaker, unfortunately, now is a thing where I can't automatically upload to YouTube anymore. So I have to, either I have my RS feed link, and I have all of my old and it's updating now in my current episodes of my podcast, and you can see that on my playlist. I have that up there. But also, I'm doing a thing where I'm creating a video where it's a motion movement. So you can either have that aspect of the podcast with the stagnant video, stagnant image in the background, or the video that has my icon for my channel moving, and in the essence that this is the month of October. I'm focusing in on Halloween. It has that gritty, scary horror feel to it. So I'd like to know what you all think. So with that being said, feel free to, give me comments about the aspects of what I'm about to say now. So I had let me rephrase it. I had talked about this before with coworkers, in college, and when I graduated, I had a coworker that's interested in horror films. So going back to when I was in college, I presented the question and wanting to know what they thought do you think that horror films are essentially commentary and a mechanism, so to speak, as of survival skills in order to put yourself in a scenario of what would you do in this certain situation? And that feeling of overcoming such terror and trauma and getting to the next step to figure out the solution to the problem. Do you think that's another reason why people enjoy like watching horror films? And so I had a coworker tell me that she thinks that it's one of those things as I'm just going off of memory here and paraphrasing, of course. It's a vehicle for people to have a platform to escape the reality of feeling trapped in fear. And then I had another coworker say that I think it's something completely different with the aspect of fear that along the lines of euphoria, of his perspective about it. So I'd like to know what you all think. All right, so I'm going to get into the aspects of facts about the movie itself. All right, here we go. So these are exactly 13 facts about Jason Takes Manhattan. So it goes into saying this, and of course this source will be provided for you in this episode, and it's ihorror.com. So it was published on 2017 of July 28th. So Piper St. James is the writer of this. So while the name is a bit misleading, Friday the 13th part, so Roman numerals here, I think it's part 9 with my Roman numerals here. So Jason Takes Manhattan did indeed take the infamous killer Jason Voorhees out of Crystal Lake and into a new territory. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the hockey mask wearing, machete wielding, lurking around in the Big Apple until the last act of the film. When we do see him in all of his intense horror, and in Times Square, it is a magical shot. So and then I think what they're saying about a magical shot is if it's something that is of how they angle with the trick of the camera angles and special effects, that is something as if he just appeared out of nowhere. That's a feat in itself to do. So he hunted for 7 movies and that was put in the 80s, New York, into the sea of neon lights, taxi cabs, and the punk music of that, which is surreal. However, the change in the scenery doesn't faze Jason for long as he gets back to what he does. Whether you love it or hate it, haven't seen it since 1989, or just watched it yesterday, here are 13 things you may not have known about the film. During the first take, when actor Kane Hodder initially kicks the street punk's boombox in Times Square, his foot really did get stuck. And Kane Hodder, I believe, is the actor I was mentioning about that was in Young and the Restless. And that's still going on now. And that's really something how they manage to keep up with the trends of the time to make it still relevant today with the aspect of daytime soaps. And that's another fact. If I'm not mistaken, the whole reason why in itself it's named daytime soaps is the aspect of the commercial. And advertisements particularly would show different soap ads as pertaining to the women that is the demographic of who would watch these type of shows. All right, so excuse me. When Jason comes across Reenie's dog, Toby, he was supposed to kick him in the script. Kane took the director aside and said he didn't think it was in Jason's character to do this, to which the director agreed and removed it from the script. The film's working script title was Ashes to Ashes to hide from the prying eyes. They were doing another Friday the 13th movie. As well as to avoid fans interfering with filming, the fake script also renamed Jason to Ethan. The film was shot in U.S. locations, but it was mostly in Vancouver, Canada, that is, where it was shot. The trailer for Part 8 made the audience believe the majority of the action took place in the Big Apple, not on a boat. While yes, the crew did go to New York to film the Times Square scene, the budget of $4 million was very limited, and the cost of filming in NYC was way too high of stake. That's another thing too with, it's quite interesting with different states and countries what's more feasible to, for directors and, the actors and the crew to go as far as to produce films. All right, so, and then it also says when push came to shove, all of the other scenes were also filmed in Vancouver. So in reality, Jason took over Vancouver. That's quite funny. So the original script called for a lot more of Jason to be in Manhattan. Director Rob Heaton explained the way I envisioned it for the first third of the movie. We'd be on the boat. Then we'd get to New York at the end of the first act. Everything about New York was going to be completely exploited and milked. There was going to be a tremendous scene on the Brooklyn Bridge, a boxing match in Madison Square Garden. Jason would go through department stores, Broadway plays. He'd even crawl into the top of the Statue of Liberty and dive off. So the director of Part 8 initially directed 2 episodes of Friday the 13th. The series being impressed with the work on the television series, the studio bought him to direct Jason Takes Manhattan. So it's Part 8. I was off by 1. Okay, as they were developing the story, newly appointed director Rob Heaton wanted to take Jason out of Crystal Lake and put him into a city. At the time, he had no specific city in mind. Executive producer Frank Manasciuco Jr. followed up with Jason Takes Manhattan. Heaton explained he didn't have a destination in mind, but the exec producer suggests Manhattan, then Manhattan Jason will go. So Elizabeth Berkley, which is Jessie from Saved by the Bell, initially auditioned for the lead role of Rennie. But the role eventually went to Jensen Daggett. And, again, that's going on the aspect of casting someone like Elizabeth Berkley, because at the time she was part of the pop mainstream culture, particularly with teens and all of this, that youth culture, and so that, influxing that with is quite appropriate in going on the same wavelength, I think, of the A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So originally the script called for Rennie to have a nude scene to debunk the theory, only bad girls in horror films took off their clothing. To the surprise that May, Jensen Daggett would not do this. In fact, the character of Rennie is perhaps the most clothed character in the horror movie history, barely ever removing any of her clothes, which is good. I think that's for the most part, and highlighting this because this is the emphasis of, when you take that stand of drawing a line in the sand, and you say that, and you present that things can be done in a dignified way without stating the obvious of showing you're bearing, literally bearing yourself like that. You can still prove the point of the message that horror films take with the aspects of the corruption that overt sexuality can, hurt the innocence and the aspect of that of lost, abandoned youth, So good on her. I commend that. That's great. All right, so of course every Friday film doesn't have to include some nudity. So to show her it was no big deal, the director Rob Heaton removed, and they're trying to show this how this aspect to me from my point of view about grooming, and that's quite prevalent in this. So little did he know the cameras were rolling and captured every moment that he was doing. So there you go. It's unfortunate that this happens a lot too. To rein this all in, bring this back to light with the dismantling of Hollywood. Particularly with the aspects of what's going on with P. Diddy, and then how what Cat Williams depicted, and what will come at May, and what will come face the big light at the end of the tunnel. That the aspect of debauchery, is no longer needed. And it shouldn't have been, prevalent in Hollywood. It shouldn't have been a thing where this is normalized. And, there's something to be said about that. Excuse me. So Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan had a final count of Jason Voorhees getting rid of 18 people. The initial poster of Part 8 was supposed to be Jason taking out the Heart of and I Love NY poster. In fact, there were two versions. Sorry about that. Had to take a quick break. Get some, drink some water, get my throat coated there. The weather is changing here where I live, and so it's usually hot, and now it's getting cooler. So that's wreaking havoc on my immune system. But take vitamin C, keep active, I'll be fine. So it says I Love New York poster, and it says, in fact, there were two versions, one with the blood on the knife and one without, in fear of the bloody knife being way too graphic. However, the New York Tourism Committee complained about the poster, and a new concept was created. All right, so with this being said, this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care out there. Bye-bye now.